Okay, so on this nice Saturday morning, I want to try to, excuse me, complete chapter 9 of Mark. And as I have been saying, things will get, you know, more focused on a highlight, I think, which would be the temple cleansing and the start of the Passion of Jesus and some of those controversies before his arrest, including the eschatological discourse in chapter 13. And we keep in mind that I adhere to the view that Mark is the first of the four evangelists or canonical gospel writers. And so it's interesting to see how the originally written version of some things takes place. So we've seen the transfiguration, we've seen the second announcement of the passion, and then right after that comes this sort of first go around regarding Jesus's condemnation, critique of ambition for probably church positions. This is somewhat parallel to something that's going to happen a little later when the sons of Zebedee are going to ask for privileged positions in Jesus's glory, says Mark, not kingdom like Matthew. Excuse me. Because Mark is allergic to kingdom for Jesus, and really Jesus is in any way politically directly relevant. So that on the way, which is one of one of the Markan concepts, that they are on the way. Uh, they are going to be going to Jerusalem in 1032. Jesus marches or walks ahead of them, and they are troubled and afraid as as they go up to Mount Zion, Jerusalem. That's where he announces the third for the third time the passion. And so the way, which is one of the terms for Christianity in Acts and elsewhere, is synonymous with following Jesus and Christianity. So they had been arguing as to who was the greatest. And Jesus says to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. So this, I think, comes under the rubric of whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted, which I think is a rock solid historical saying of Jesus. If we keep in mind the Johannine verse in 1232, when I am lifted up from the earth, or exalted from the earth, I will draw all to me. The following verse clarifies that this indicates the type of death Jesus would suffer. And in fact, in Aramaic, most explicitly, the verb, zakat, this verb, to be lifted up, is synonymous with crucifixion or impalement. We actually have an example of that in Ezra 6:11 in Aramaic. And so I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. I don't know who really watches these YouTube videos. I don't think it's very many, but nevertheless, it's what I do and what I share. And I think repetition is one of the ways to assimilate things that I spent many years studying. So that the idea of being a servant as opposed to a lord, that's going to occur in 1041 and following, a tremendous parallel sort of companion to this, where the other 10 disciples are angry at James and John for wanting these privileged positions, and Jesus contrasts those who lord it over, a katakirio Greek verb, later used by Peter in a church context. Don't lord it over the flock. And when the chief shepherd comes, this is in First Peter, I think, chapter 5. So that you have the idea that in 1044, that the one who wants to be first should be slave of all, or ebeth, or doulos. And this would be right along the suffering servant terminology in Hebrew, the ebed Yahweh. In Greek, they use pais, which is interesting because pais in Greek is a child, a boy, a servant, a sort of a lesser status person. So the Greek version of Isaiah 53 prefers pais to doulos. Very interesting. In Hebrew, ebeth is a slave servant. And it's interesting because Jesus takes a child, in this case, a paidos, a child, not unrelated to pais, and he's the example of uh, how we are supposed to be disposed to enter into the kingdom. And it's added that whoever receives such a child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me doesn't receive me, but the one who sent me. An apostello verb. So Jesus here is also an apostle, sent. I think Mark is probably going to use the word apostle also for the disciples, but in any case, you have this model of a child. And the parallel in Matthew 18 is probably more elaborated. If you don't become as a child, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. One of these least ones, etc. A Matthean theme. Then you have interposed, I suppose, an episode regarding, do you have to belong to Jesus's group in order to cast out demons or to do miracles or things of that sort? And Jesus here takes the position that whoever is not against us is with us. Luke has two versions. I was looking at it. One version in Luke says the same thing, but another version in Luke, more of an isolated saying, in 11:23 says, "Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me, uh, disperses, or does the opposite of gather, divide maybe." So, and then they add another saying of Jesus, "Truly I say to you, whoever gives a cup of water to drink because you belong to Christ," sort of in third person, this could be from Jesus or from the early church, etc., regarding the missionaries that are sent, will by no means lose his reward or his salary, wages, recompense, etc. And I was saying that this is interposed because what follows is this saying about scandalizing one of the little ones. So these would not necessarily be children, just humble people, little ones, etc. There's many ways to scandalize little ones. Certainly in the Catholic Church and in other congregations, we've seen the great scandal of sex abuse, coupled with covering up and the sex abuse, a double whammy, enormous crime. And apparently, these kinds of passages were not seriously taken by so many people, right? And so you have this concern for little ones. They may be like the weak ones in the Pauline letters as opposed to the strong who are not as squeamish. Uh, Today we have people that are arrogant about even observing the minimal uh, safeguards in this coronavirus crisis, and they say we don't want to wear a mask just to make somebody comfortable. So it's a stupid view of what's going on. It's not to make people comfortable, but to protect yourself and others. But certainly, supposing, which is not the case, that there were people immune to the virus, they could handle poisonous snakes and nothing happens or something, they would still be, if they were Christians, which I doubt that they are, even if they deliriously think they are. It would be something that Jesus would say, try to, adhere to the desires of others. I learned that from Helmut Kester at Harvard, that when Paul talks about conscience, he's sometimes saying, not about your conscience, let your conscience be clean, but think of the conscience of the other that you may be offending. And then it says, that it's better to not have been born, I guess, if you're causing scandal, and it's better to even cut off your limbs if it causes you to sin. It is better to enter into life crippled and with two hands, go into Gehenna, hell, the place where they burned, by the way. That's where the Gehenna comes from. Jeremiah 7 and other places, the Gay Ben Himnon, the valley of the son of Himnon. That's where they burnt the trash, and it's going to become a symbol for hell. Kind of a dump outside Jerusalem. He applies it to the feet too. And then, interestingly enough, he talks about this hell as the place where the worm doesn't die and the fire is not quenched. And this is at the very end of Isaiah. Very interesting passage. I think in the synagogue they reverse it because it's too a nasty passage. But it does talk about this everlasting fire in Isaiah at the very end, the corpses of those who rebelled against me, which is a bookend to the beginning of Isaiah. And then it says, and they shall be the horror of the whole world, using this word deiraon, which is only used otherwise in Daniel 12:2 for those who are condemned to the opposite of life, when there's a rising of many from the dust of the earth in Daniel 12, the beginning of the chapter. So you have this idea of fire. And then Mark goes on to say, everyone will be salted with fire. And some people think this is related to the fire in Rome that Nero started in the year 64, I believe. And this gospel would have been written around that time. Persecution and the fire that burnt much of the city would be fresh in everybody's minds. And fire is related to the sacrifice. Salt is related to the sacrifices the Jews offered in Leviticus 2, I think my Bible note says. And so you have this nifty kind of association of concepts there. So in Leviticus 2:13, you have that victims are to be salted, and this would be very much in line with being a victim of persecution for being a Christian in Rome. And then again, another saying, be salt of the earth, have salt in yourselves, peace with one another, etc. So you have these kind of connected concepts, and we've run out of time, so we've gone a little over actually. So we'll have to stop there and continue next time.